Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Nelson. I'm the Director of Learning for New Signature. And what we're going to be doing today is presenting the Microsoft Tech Showcase on Microsoft Azure. David Trejo is going to be leading the call, and he is one of our senior consultants on the infrastructure team. He's not just an instructor, he's one of our senior practicing consultants, proficient and certified throughout the entire Microsoft stack, including Azure. He has well over 20 Microsoft certifications and 10 years of experience as an IT professional. What he's going to do today is cover a clear explanation of the Azure platform and how you can use it to optimize how IT enables your business. Today's focus is going to be providing you an overview of what Microsoft Azure can do. For more in-depth training, however, we do offer a more in-depth 2-day workshop for IT professionals that's actually led by David Trejo and his team. It's complete with hands-on labs and takeaway reference materials. So for more information about that, you can reach out to info@newsignature.com. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David Trejo, and he can start going over our content for today. David?
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to meet you all. Once again, my name is David Trejo. Thank you for the nice introduction there, Andy.
Gladly.
So I work with both Azure and the Windows server data center practice that we have pretty much all day, every day. So feel free to send any questions to Christine during the entire process here. Our goal is to get you fully acclimated to the Azure solution. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap in some of the questions. So we'll get to that. One moment here.
And I should mention, if questions come up during the presentation, feel free to ask questions. You can just type them in the chat, and Christine is going to be watching the chat for questions, and then she'll pass them over to David so he can answer them when the timing's appropriate.
Starting our PowerPoint here. Be done uploading in just a moment here. About another 15 seconds here, and we'll have it ready to go for you. All right, so it looks like it should start displaying for everyone. In just a moment here. So in terms of the modules that we're going to discuss today while this continues to load here, we're going to focus on an intro to cloud computing. Cloud is a term that's used for a variety of different technologies from a variety of different vendors, and it's always good to be on the same page as to what we're going to be referencing. After that, we're going to discuss more in depth what the Microsoft Azure solution is, how it relates to cloud computing. Going to discover cloud services, a component of Microsoft Azure that provides you with building blocks for some very powerful service delivery. Azure websites, so that you can get straight into building a website-focused solution on Azure. Actual virtual machines. So a lot of folks are actually introduced into the the Azure product suite through the fact that it can run virtual machines. And what we'll do is we'll focus on that so you can see what you can do with raw virtual machines, some workload options so you can get some real-world scenarios under the belt there, and then also hybrid. One of the really compelling capabilities of Azure is to really get you a valid hybrid solution, not something that you can sort of kind of jimmy together, but this is going to be something that is native to the entire platform, from Server 2012 R2 all the way up to solutions like the Azure Pack. Now, it looks like this is taking a little too long to load, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my desktop here, and we're going to go into presentation mode. So Andy, if you can do me a favor here and let me know once you guys are able to see it.
Yeah, we can see it now. Thanks for doing
perfect.
that.
Sorry for the delay there. So once again, my name is David Trejo. I'm a senior consultant. I'm also a forward deployed engineer. Actually, one of the reasons I was running a minute or two late was I was finishing up a cluster deployment. So we work a lot with on-premise and Azure, so this is not really focusing on just Azure as a technology, but also what Azure can do with what you already have. Once again, this is going to be our agenda for the day. So it's always very important to start out with what the cloud is. It's a very nebulous concept. Sales folks love using it because it's a simple word that everybody already knows. But it's always important to find out, the essence of it. And when it comes down to it, it's actually split up into a variety of services, which we'll come to in just a moment. But from a capability factor, this sort of solution out there that's rather nebulous at the moment does give you some native capabilities, because we're not talking about something, like a piece of hardware. We're not talking about a server or servers or clusters. There's some really interesting things that come into play into discussions. For example, the ability to compensate for inactivity periods. That's something that's very hard to deal with on-premise because you've already invested capital in the infrastructure, whether it's a single server, a cluster, or some sort of multi-cluster solution. Growth is something that you can plan for, but sometimes adjusting for, let's say, very quick, very rapid, very project-oriented growth is something that the cloud is usually pushed for, because the idea is you don't have a small container in a small closet or in a large data center. You have something that is designed for something purely service-based. And most of the time, a lot of customers can do a great job, but there are those projects where you simply can't account for growth fast enough. Bursting. So for example, let's say you have a large compute job, whether it's a SQL report that you're running, whether somebody's exposed reporting services to a bunch of users and folks maybe are abusing it or something like that. That can always happen. Or SharePoint. You have SharePoint search. Basically it's just running a nightly job, indexing maybe a bunch of documents that were just saved for records retention. Sometimes you can deal with it. Sometimes, unfortunately, you can't, and the rest of your infrastructure suffers. And then predictable bursting. Maybe you have monthly reports that are used for, some sort of business intelligence, whether you're using Great Plains or for accounting, or you're using CRM for relationship management. You'll have these monthly reports that you need to present to executives. What if you can account for some of them, but they keep on getting greater, and your predictable bursting sort of shifts into the growing fast? It gets a little complicated to deal with. In essence, this is what cloud computing gives you. What we usually use to approach the conversation is software as a service. Pretty much everybody out there is used to software as a service. It's never been marketed as that. It's always been a service. So whether you're using Outlook.com, or if you folks have had an opportunity to trial out or use in production Office 365, a lot of the time you're interfacing with a website. Maybe you're using a client of sort, maybe Outlook, something like that, and you're interfacing with something that you don't really need to do too much with when it comes down to managing. You simply create users, you do a lot of the functionality work, but you don't actually really manage any infrastructure. That's more consuming than anything else. This right here, this middle section, is really the essence of what cloud computing is, and that is platform as a service. So if I want to make an ASP.NET website, I can simply set up an IIS server, and there we go. Give it internet access. But what if I want to add another one? What if I want to automate that process? What if I want scalability beyond really what accounting will be willing to deal with permanently? Platform as a service is designed so that you can have somebody else worry about the infrastructure level, and you handle the platform. You handle the coding. You handle distribution. Maybe you handle how the system adjusts to load, but you don't actually design the subsystem that enables you to do that. And then infrastructure. Like I said, infrastructure is one that a lot of folks are usually critical about internally, because everybody knows at this day and age how to manage infrastructure. You know how to install Windows Server. You know how to set up a file share. You know how to set up even a remote desktop farm. You might not know how to program. You might not really have the design experience to create a software solution out of it, but a lot of the Windows Server infrastructure is designed so that it's very compartmentalized. You simply deploy a component. There's some instructions usually to deploy it a specific way, and that's what infrastructure as a service is designed to do, to give those folks that are very server-oriented. And you can still use PowerShell, you can still use all of that, but you're focused on having full VM level control. You do that without worrying about the infrastructure. And this right here gives you a very clear picture of what I've just covered, but with even more detail. So if we look at the packaged software, this could be maybe a website with some sort of front end. You can log in, you can go ahead and use their service. Let's say I set up my own email system in some way. You pretty much have all of the layers. This can translate both to OSI or IP, TCP IP layers, but in general, this is most of what people would be interacting with. And as you can see from the software on the right to the left, you actually gain access to more, but you also are responsible for more. So you are responsible for patching the OS. You're responsible for putting a destination out there for your data. And what's great is this is normal. This is something where your design can be applied in the method here that works best for you. It's not designed to sort of pigeonhole you into the one solution they offer. They offer all of this. And that's basically what Microsoft Azure is. It's a comprehensive set of services. It's not one service, it's many, that enables you to build things, if that's what you want to do, allows you to deploy, allows you to manage applications, so you get a lot of management oversight over this. And the best part here is Microsoft has a global footprint. And this is not simply they sell things, in Russia, or they sell things in Australia. They have data centers in all these locations. So you have immediate access and very low latency to work with when you deploy this. And really, there's three focuses here. It's very flexible, it's very open, which I'll get to later, and it's very solid in terms of resiliency. This is sort of the approach that you'll have when working with Azure in terms of what it is that you want to do. So you'll have the cloud services, websites, virtual machines, and mobile services, and media services as the sort of focuses when you want to deploy a solution out there. We'll cover all of this in detail, but the focus is cloud service is going to be focused more on more complex deployments. We're talking about maybe it could be VMs, it could be published code. But the idea there is I have a managed solution to work with. Websites are going to be more, if you guys are all probably familiar with things like WordPress or general content management systems. Websites are going to be focused more on using either pre-built solutions or simpler coding, focusing more on content creation than setting up your own content management system. Virtual machines I've already covered. You have the ability to basically have an image deployed, let's say, Server 2012, or you can even use Linux, which I'll cover. Mobile services. So you'll have folks creating raw content and basically content management systems in cloud services. They need to be able to work with a variety of different platforms, and mobile has exploded at this point. So you also have full mobile capability so that I can go ahead and create an application that can talk to a Windows mobile phone. There's a specific push mechanism for Windows. There's one for iOS on the iPhone platform, one for Android, and you have the ability to use that. And then finally, something that a lot of folks aren't even familiar yet because it's fortunately hasn't been promoted too much is media services. This is the ability to have a built-in, ready-to-go content distribution network ready for you so you can deploy media very effectively. The basic building block of everything on Azure is going to be an instance. If you ever work with databases, you hear that all the time. It applies to applications, things as well. Virtual machines is another way to put it. In this case, this is sort of what it looks like when you look at things from a monetary standpoint. The prices are very different than what you're used to with capital expenditures. This is designed to be something you should be familiar with if you've ever looked at cloud services. So the idea here is per service hour and build in 1 minute increments. This is sort of the total per hour. This is what you would expect to pay for these instance sizes, and they translate directly to the CPU time there, the amount of memory, persistent storage. As you can see here, you can go from something very minor, let's say for a simple, let's say a test base. You want to log in and you want to take a look and poke around at what Server 2012 R2 looks like, to something extra large where you have 8 cores worth of compute capacity, 14 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes worth of storage, where you have something really formidable. And this isn't designed for you to buy an extra large. This is designed to use it as a resource. So you could have 10, you could have 20 of them. Very compelling solution component of Azure is licensing. So in the past, it used to be actually called Windows Azure. There was some confusion, so Microsoft has relabeled it as Microsoft Azure. But the fact of the matter is a lot of customers do use it for Windows. So one of the compelling components of the solution is licensing. When you go ahead and purchase a Windows Server instance, or you go ahead and, there's different ways to think of it. I'm renting something, I'm allocating my funding for it. There's a lot of different ways depending on how you purchase. Windows Server licensing is included. So if you decide to pick a 2008 R2 server or a 2012 R2 server, that's ready to go. You basically get Data Center installed. There's no feature difference between standard and Data Center, but you'll see that listed when you install it. Even more compelling is a Microsoft application. This actually can go either way. We have a lot of customers that have enterprise agreements with Microsoft where they have existing SQL licenses and they decide, the Windows Server license is enough for me. I'll just use my other license. Or maybe they want to take advantage of the fact that they have 8 cores now and want to use licensing that's more appropriate. Let's say they were on 2005 or SQL Server 2008 R2 and really want to take advantage of the SQL core licensing of 2012 or 2014. You actually have licensing costs included for SQL as well for specific types of virtual machines. So that makes it very easy to deploy a solution without having to worry about budgetary constraints or accounting or anything like that. And of course, there are external applications that you can always use. Some new additions have been Oracle. So you can actually get instances that are licensed for Oracle databases. What's all of this worth if you can't keep it online, of course? And availability is incredibly important to Microsoft. Something that they promote heavily is something called an availability set. So if I'm going to go ahead and set up a virtual machine and I'm responsible for it, I have to go ahead and set up, I'll set up a cluster or I'll set up a web farm is usually the main thing we see. So that, I'll have my databases on the back end. I'll have maybe 2 or more IIS servers on the front. How do I make these even more highly available? And if you use an availability set, which basically sets different components of the availability set in different fault domains, let's say for patching or otherwise, you can achieve basically 3.5 9 or 3 and then 5 9 there for basically less than 5 hours of downtime per year. And this covers everything, patching, hardware upgrades, computer failure, that sort of thing. So these are very disparate inside the various data centers. Of course, you're still, because you're managing your VM levels, you're still responsible if, let's say, a patch didn't go well. So what's great about Azure is it lets you build in that high availability so that you can account for that on your own. As I discussed earlier, there's a global footprint, so you have data centers all over the world, dozens and dozens of data centers. Microsoft uses its Global Foundation Services, which is responsible for running pretty much all of the Microsoft services, from Hotmail to Outlook.com to Office 365. This is handled by a team that does nothing else but this, and does nothing else also but improving it. So this isn't some project that Microsoft is using. This is, and as you've seen with the new CEO, this is a incredibly prominent focus within the organization. So you can see here the countries that are covered. Pretty much every section of the globe here. And I believe the Australia data center, there was a very large data center that they were deploying in Australia, is now online. So here's a link to the Microsoft Azure trial. I'm just going to go ahead and click on it here so you guys can take a look and see what it looks like. Very easy to get to. Great opportunity here to put it through its paces. You get $200 worth of services. If you noticed that earlier slide there, showed everything was in pretty much cents. So you can run a 2012 R2 VM, probably take you about 5 minutes to get that up and running. Once you get it up and running, you could run it for an hour and you would spend probably less than $1 at that point. It's great for getting a new technology up and running and poking at it. What does this new start menu that everybody's talking about in 2012 R2 look like? The right clicking on the start menu button. What if I want to go ahead and poke around on websites and see what they can do? We're doing all this WordPress stuff on LAMP servers or on IIS. What does this look like? Does it even have the newest version on there? And pretty much all you need to do is sign up. You can use a Microsoft account. If you already have Office 365 and Directory Sync, you can use an organizational account. One thing to keep in mind is we do recommend you sort of keep this away from any business accounts if you're going to use an EA. That sort of does complicate things. This is great for getting up and running so your developers can have their own account. Things like MSDN and enterprise agreements should be always handled through your value-added reseller. But as you can see here, you don't have any limitations. It's pretty much just a $200 capability there, so you can go ahead and try SQL databases. One of the new things I've been getting asked by every developer I've spoken about is, hey, what is this new SQL Azure database replication feature where you can pick the primary node and you can go ahead and shift things around? You can test all of that. Most of the demos I actually do for labs involve having folks sign up for a trial and having them set up very complex SQL deployments. So cloud services. This is the one that confuses a lot of folks when they're poking around. They're wondering what this thing is, because it's kind of nebulous in terms of what it is, because you're already in the cloud. So what is a service thing? And basically, what is platform as a service when it interfaces with all of these things? So cloud services are really shifting from having VMs, having applications, and having these disparate components, and really focusing on service delivery. So the idea is a cloud service does many, many things. It's management. So I have a variety of different machines that make up a web role. I'm not really focusing on saying I have 3 VMs or I have 6 VMs. I have a cloud service that provides the customer service that I'm looking for. I have configurations. I have the ability to push out different configurations to a variety of different subcomponents. I have security. Cloud services don't allow communication between other cloud services. So it's meant to provide some segmentation. Networking as well. And also, like I said, it's focused on a service model. I want to be able to deliver the web service or the back-end service. And I want to be able to scale that out automatically. As you can see here, we've defined roles in our case. So we have a web role. That could be, basically a bunch of just front-end servers that have published an application to. And then I have a worker role where I have sort of a back-end application. I've networked these together so that they can go ahead and take the presentation layer and really start crunching some numbers for me. As you can see here, these are all virtual machines. I could have deployed these virtual machines manually myself. Just go in there and go ahead and create a new VM and then add it to the cloud service, or it can actually deploy them for me. So let's say for some reason I just decided to publish, this new crazy, very good-looking, very graphic-intensive website without really notifying my network team. But I do have a cloud service that they've configured for me to scale. Let's say the servers start hitting about 50% CPU. If I've configured it, it'll start deploying additional nodes to distribute that load. Things like load balancers, all of that is handled for you automatically. This is an example of just one of those containers if I want to go ahead and make a VM myself. When you go ahead and create a virtual machine, it implies that you're not creating a separate web service, so it will create a web service for you. The limitations are there because you don't have any other nodes to load balance with and whatnot, so you'd have to sort of start from the ground up, but it allows you to do that. When you go ahead and add virtual machines, those features then become available. So this isn't some toy. This is a very powerful solution, but it's also a respectful solution. It understands that you have tiers to work with. The tiers change. When you're moving to a cloud service, you don't have some of the limitations that you have on-premise in terms of scalability, automation. Those are really built in. So yes, it's powerful, but it's also respectful of the different layers that you're going to have. So I'm going to have my web layer, so consider that sort of the front end and application. I'm going to have my back end database. This could be SQL running on those application licensed virtual machines that I mentioned, or it could be SQL Azure, which is basically SQL delivered as a platform and as a service. What's incredibly compelling is once we start talking about not this newfangled service that you should really, really try because it's awesome. It's how do I get this working with my existing investment? Obviously, you have a very powerful infrastructure that you've worked very hard to develop. We don't want to ignore that. We want to simply augment that in a way that works best for you. And one of the original ways to target this was to go ahead and use a VPN tunnel. In this case, you'll notice we have domain controllers up there. Domain controllers are fully supported. You need to be using 2008 R2 or above, which is one of the images. But that's fully supported, and now you have some resources that are on-premise, and you have some resources that are basically spread out over the cloud that is Azure.
Hey, Dave,
Yes.
we have a question. Are the dotted lines firewalls or just the green lines? Sorry, the dotted boxes.
Sure. So this is meant to show you the location as a component here of the drawing. What you would use for firewalls would be on-premise. You would use your routing infrastructure and/or VPN concentrators to limit what subnets you can talk to. You have subnets on Azure. At the moment, the way you segment components up there is you create what's called a virtual network, and you have ACLs that you use that allow subnets in one virtual network to talk to another virtual network. I know Barracuda Networks is releasing a firewall. It's going to be a one-armed firewall. So for some very complex environments where security is a concern, usually that requires additional discussion. But in terms of firewalls, ACLs at the VM level have not been exposed yet. Let me know if there's a follow-up to that one. Otherwise, I'll continue here.
Dave, I think that question was about the slide itself. What each of the different dotted lines on the slide represent. It looks like the green lines represent firewalls, and then the dark blue lines represent the cloud services, and the light blue lines are the different environments, the Azure environment versus your on-prem environment. Is that correct?
Correct. In this case, actually, what they've done is they've deployed the web and the backend SQL database into the same cloud service.
Okay.
I'd actually recommend, sort of like the previous slide, deploying different types of roles into different cloud services. That way you're able to unify the reaction type to a specific situation. I don't necessarily want to deploy additional SQL servers, but I absolutely, let's say, want to deploy additional web servers if the load is there, because really the load's going to be on those front ends.
Okay. So the green lines are the firewalls. The bright blue lines are the different environments, your on-prem environment versus your Azure environment. And the dark blue lines represent your distinct cloud services in Azure.
Correct.
Thank you.
So this is usually the biggest uh, sort of black hole in terms of information. A lot of folks usually aren't familiar with a platform solution because usually you've created a solution on premise that works well for you. This is probably the most powerful component, however, of Azure, which is the ability to deploy code, uh, have things like networking and all of that configured for you, instances, failover, that sort of thing. In this case, I simply deploy a solution. I can go into Visual Studio, publish an ASP.NET straight to Azure. It will handle everything else for me. Network load balancing, because I've, let's say, added 2 nodes, is handled automatically for me. Failure, let's say one of my nodes is having issues. Maybe I didn't program it that well. You know, I'm a terrible programmer myself. I'm more of a script writer and using PowerShell and whatnot. Maybe it's just a memory leak and it just got really bad on one of the nodes and it crashed. Well, the load balancer is handling all of that for me and will automatically reroute. So why is PaaS so powerful here? It's faster. There's a lot less work that you do. You don't have to install. It's faster to release. It's also faster in performance. Things like antivirus or management agents, all of that isn't running because it's designed to be very disposable. So once I go ahead and create a node and it's no longer needed, it's disposed of. And the idea is the release time, the updates. You have also full development integration here, so you have the ability to release solutions in Visual Studio to a staging area. So you can actually go ahead and fully test this and then simply swap it out with production. It's cheaper. There's a lot less work for you to do, a lot less work for your admins to do. There's tons of work still to do, of course, to develop your application and make it better and whatnot. But there's a lot of that annoyingness that's gone. Because there's a lot less to support. You don't have to patch IIS. The newest version is always there. And like I said, you have that staging capability, so you don't have to worry about it working or not. You'll fully be able to test it without releasing it into production. In addition, it's lower risk. You don't have to go ahead and worry about the multiple components of networking, load balancing. All of that is handled for you seamlessly. So really, this and software as a service are full, truly cloud solutions where you're not really just sort of moving things over there. You're fully taking advantage of all of the features that it can bring to bear. One of the most compelling things about Azure is that it's not a PaaS solution. It's not an IaaS solution only. It's not software as a service. It really allows you to do whatever works best for you. So you have the physical aspect where you can network and create a hybrid solution with on-premise. You have the virtual capability where you have your Hyper-V and whatnot on-premise. You have infrastructure service, platform as a service, and software that can all talk to each other. So you have a full comprehensive solution that can really do anything you want it to do. Now, sort of stepping back, I've been talking about deploying solutions and really content management level, back-end developer stuff. What about folks that just want to create a nice little WordPress page or want to use a very powerful CMS, but really want to give it to their front-end developers? I want to go ahead and have the beautiful artwork that represents my art company, or I really want the great customer relationship images that represents my financial firm. I want them to focus on that, fluidity on the website, all of that. That's what the websites are perfect for. The idea here is it's very platform as a service like. You can both have shared instances. You can continuously add additional units. You can have reserved instances. So in this case, I have a reserved instance that I can make even larger. I can continue to do the same thing. Now I can go ahead and create even additional nodes within a reserved space, maybe make some smaller VMs within the larger reserved space. And the idea there is that I can go ahead and focus more on the front-end coding than having to worry about back-end as well. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. So I'm actually going to log in with it's referred to as a Microsoft account. Oh, go ahead. You'll notice that there's also the separate billing areas as well there. Go ahead and go to the management portal here. I'm going to go ahead and log in. Using an Outlook account here. So I'm using Internet Explorer. Most of the time I actually end up using Chrome. Works great. You notice I don't have any bookmarks here. I usually don't use IE too much. Because some of the work I do, I'm more of a Chrome person. This adjusts to pretty much any. And you'll notice here, this is sort of what it looks like when you've gone ahead and done too much with your trial. You'll get a nice billing update here too as well. So you'll notice here I have a variety. This is something you'll see immediately on the trial. I have a variety of resources that I can go ahead and allocate. I can go ahead and create a virtual machine. We're actually going to focus on websites right now. I'm going to show you a very powerful capability here. I'm going to go to Create Website. I have the ability, and you'll notice this pops up. This is actually the same menu as when you go to New. I'm going to go ahead and create a website. I can go ahead and create something if I've gone ahead and set this up for my developers so they can have a hosting plan, has a bunch of characteristics on it. I'm actually going to go to the gallery over here. And you'll see this is where it becomes very powerful, where I let the front-end developers do everything that they want to do. They can go ahead and use Apache and Tomcat without having to set up LAMP servers. It's already done for you. They can go ahead and use Drupal. My folks are great at designing, taking it from just a variety of nodes to making it a true platform. I don't need to basically spend my time worrying about the infrastructure. If it's busy, it'll add additional nodes. You'll notice there are very popular solutions like the very chic here, Ghost blog. You'll also see the latest version of WordPress here. So it's actually, I think I have a WordPress blog floating out there. It was at 3.90. They've just upgraded it to 3.91. And what you do is you have the full option capability here. So you would use CNAMEs to redirect to it. You'll notice here that you'll see MySQL. WordPress, in this case, is going to be using a MySQL backend. You have the full capability here of using a very open stack. So this would be LAMP running on Windows. If you create a virtual machine, you have the ability to, which I'll show you later, you have the ability to use Linux just as you would Windows. In addition, let's say I have a lot of folks that are going to be accessing this from Brazil. New data center Microsoft has in Brazil. I can go ahead and have this deployed at that data center from my desk here in Washington, D.C. And I have the full proper setup of WordPress here, so I can go ahead and create salted passphrases. Simply deploy this and it'll be ready to go. So this is the fun part. This is the one that lets you test things just like you would on premise. Lets you run these huge workloads that don't really have to change too much. Platform is a big jump because a lot of folks are used to having, let's say, a vendor installer. You could be using things like very powerful solutions like Sitecore, or using a variety of different products that are prepackaged for you. You simply install them. And maybe that's what you're used to. You want to go ahead and leverage the cloud for that. You don't necessarily want to do the platform as a service. The solution might do it for you. You simply give it more virtual machines and it handles it for you. What's beautiful is there's an included gallery, which I'll cover, and portability, which I'll cover as well. Finally, persistent drives. That's something that's very important. We want to make sure this data can live up there, that it's not designed to be just for a one-off test. So the Azure Infrastructure as a Service solution brings a lot to bear in terms of images. Not only do you get the Windows images that we're pretty much always looking for, but you also get a variety of not only Linux, but also application images as well. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. It's getting a little ahead of myself here. One more slide there. As you can see here, you're going to be using new versions. Pretty much these are released very frequently. And the idea too is that you can go ahead and not just worry about these new images that you've deployed, but you can actually go ahead and move them around. So if you have a very large deployment at your data center, you can go ahead and move VMs to Azure, and you can go ahead and move them down. There is no lock-in, so to speak. We're using the same technology that you would be using in your data center on premise. Persistent storage is something that should be expected and is fully available on Azure. So when I go ahead and set up a VM and I shut it down, storage doesn't go away. If I've gone ahead and spent a lot of time deploying a package solution, it will stay up there. Not only that, but it's incredibly durable. So when you go ahead and purchase your storage, you have the ability to either pick local storage, local redundant storage, or geo-replicated storage. So basically, I'm creating a virtual machine and I'm going to install Windows and then I'm setting up IIS and running through all that. That VHD that is holding everything is replicated to the West Coast automatically for me. And we'll take a look in just a moment here. I'm going to go ahead and pretty much the same portal here. Go ahead and go to virtual machines. Go ahead and create virtual machines. You see this menu pop up. It's pretty much the same thing as if I were to go to new. Compute. Compute in the Azure speak here is going to focus more on getting things done here in terms of the websites that are ready to go for me, or the more infrastructure level stuff, virtual machines, the cloud services that can make up both of those, and the mobile services. So I have the ability to quick create a VM. I'm going to go ahead and pick an image. Let's say I wanted to install SUSE 11 with the third release there. I'm actually going to go to the gallery here so you can get an idea of how powerful this is. So if you look at here, I'm going to go into Windows Server so you can get an idea of what this looks like. I can go ahead and use 2008 R2 or above. Go ahead and take a look at Essentials. Let's say I have a small branch office and I'm not really sure to deploy out there. I want to see if Essentials is any good for me. I can go ahead and get that up and running. What's great is I then have more comprehensive VMs ready to go for me. So I can go ahead and try out SharePoint, but I can also go ahead and leverage things like Oracle. Oracle is something I'm going to probably deploy with multiple nodes. It's going to get kind of expensive on premise. This is fully licensed Enterprise Edition, running on 2012. I simply go ahead and pick Next on there. When you're creating virtual machines, there are two tiers as well. There's the basic and then the standard. The standard includes load balancing. So if I wanted to go ahead and create a service with virtual machines and I want to load balance the traffic coming in, let's say on 443 or port 80, you'll need a standard machine. And it's also something that can become part of a cloud service, so I can automate things. Basic does away with those, but you get some cost savings. If you see here, you'll see that this scales very, very well. If I'm simply trying something, I can try. Even if you're testing, I do recommend an A1. An A0 kind of makes a testing experience, especially if you're trying out, let's say, 2012 R2 for the first time. Doesn't make it that pleasant of experience. Giving it at least 1.5 gigs is usually what I like to do. But if you want to deploy things like remote desktop service environments, you can go ahead and add those, 8 cores, 50 gigs of memory. Usually that supports about 30 folks. So you can go ahead and really do all of that, set up your users, and you can go ahead and fully set up the networking as well. So I've talked about the building blocks. We're talking about websites. Maybe I'll use WordPress, or maybe I'll use another different, CMS, maybe Drupal. Those were some possibilities. I've talked about installing OSs. We're going to use 2012 because that's what we wanted to go ahead and poke around with. 2012 R2 because we've never even looked at it. We're going to go ahead and deploy a solution in Visual Studio, but none of this is really concrete if you're kind of a little alien to some of these things, because you need something to do. You need a reason for this. That's really what allows all of this to take off. And businesses have tons of reasons. That's why Azure has become so popular. Let's take a look at what you can do. So SQL servers, let's say you have a lot of reporting that you need to perform, and it's really becoming a burden on your infrastructure. SQL Server is a great thing to put out there, especially if you have local access. Things like creating an archive up there. So for developers that have created a bunch of shards and things like that, that's great to have local. But if I want really long-term SQL storage that I'm performing report or analysis on, it's a great solution because I can scale very, very largely, very quickly. Simply a server platform. Server as a platform keeps on adding more and more and more features. I can go ahead and leverage all of those up there, whether it's using DFS replication to have another node that I can replicate all my data to, or many of the other built-in solutions. Maybe I'll have a CA up there or something like that. There's tons and tons of roles that keep on getting added as well. Really big one is SharePoint, which I'll cover in a minute. But you can fully run SharePoint up there. You have virtual machines, you have a supported OS, and you have a lot of scalability. Let's say your search servers aren't cutting it on premise. Sure, you can go ahead and give them more RAM, but you're going to hit a limit. You know, let's say hit the limit of the host, you hit the limit of the cluster, you hit the limit of the data center. There is no limit when you're working with Azure. And then for something maybe more comprehensive than even that, we're talking about infrastructure level. So BizTalk, let's say I have a lot of legacy servers, and I just am using a very busy BizTalk environment to talk to just dozens or hundreds of these servers, and it's really putting a burden on my infrastructure. I can easily host that up there, and it's already set up for me in terms of installation. And then System Center is one a lot of folks aren't aware you can move up there. So let's say Configuration Manager, because I have a lot of images stored for machines that I'm deploying on Azure, or a lot of ISOs, that sort of thing, or a lot of legacy information up there. I can also deploy things like SCOM and other solutions using virtual machines that allow me to scale up very, very highly without putting a burden on my local infrastructure. Now, one thing I discussed earlier was using a VPN solution to go ahead and create a hybrid environment. There is another solution called ExpressRoute, which I'll discuss. But the idea is, what does that give me? You know, obviously I have a layer 3 connection, which is a start, but what else can I do besides that? Well, we start at the bottom here with the secure site-to-site connection. So we're using IPsec to do that, so that's a great first start. It's simply a data center as far as I'm concerned. I can deploy domain controllers, so now I have, let's say, Active Directory site AZ01. On Azure, I have secure machine-to-machine connectivity. So I'll have subnets. I'll have virtual networks. I can go ahead and use ACLs to allow virtual networks to talk to each other. So I can have a virtual network, let's say VNet01, and I can have a virtual network VNet02 at the East US data center. But I can actually have one of the new features that just was released. I think this is a service solution, so a lot of features are introduced frequently, very, very powerful ones, was the ability to have communication between VNets at different data centers. So when you think about it, that opens up a lot of possibilities. Now I can have a domain controller on the West Coast. Hey, I have a data center over there. Now I can go ahead and use DFS replication so that I have, you know, cross-country DR capabilities now. It gets really, really powerful. When deploying solutions, I have something called the service bus. So I can actually deploy a solution and have it talk to another cloud service using a secure and dedicated service. The service bus is really going to be focused more to developers, but it's there as well. Finally, this is a very powerful solution here, and it's open to many, many options for deployment, is SQL Data Sync. I can go ahead and have SQL data that's moved to another database for, let's say, data warehousing on Azure. I can be using basically IaaS, or infrastructure as a service, to have those SQL servers running. I can also leverage Azure SQL, which is the platform-delivered SQL, as well. So that way I can have applications talking to SQLs as if it's right there when it's actually on Azure. So SharePoint. SharePoint is everybody's baby because, you know, it's the one you grow with. It becomes an essential part of your organization. You really, really want to take good care of it. You want to go ahead and make sure that the developers are happy, the infrastructure folks are happy. It's really a really in-depth relationship. And a lot of folks aren't really ready to let go. You know, it's just like college. Folks they've become attached, and there's, you know, a great opportunity there, something like, let's say, SharePoint Online, but folks aren't ready to go ahead and let go. And, you know, there's so much to SharePoint that you already have, you know, when you have full hardware control. You can go ahead and roll your HA solution, your DR, scale as needed, add a farm for let's say, spreading out search servers and whatnot. What's great about the infrastructure as a solution service is you're managing those virtual machines. So if you have a vendor product, a vendor add-on that you really, really, really like, and something like SharePoint Online is doing it for you, it's focused more on too much web development that your organization maybe isn't ready for, that vendor doesn't support yet. You can fully roll your own solution up there. And the idea is you can deploy those resources to scale really, really well for you dynamically. And when you're ready, if it comes to it, you can always go ahead and then leverage the software as a service portion of the solution, where you can leverage Office 365, where you're sort of shifting, just like I mentioned, from virtual machines to platform as a service to software as a service to software as a service for SharePoint. I went ahead and showed you sort of a non-labeled solution a while back. This is what it looks like when you deploy something that you guys are all familiar with, which is a SharePoint farm. So you can leverage a cloud service, you can leverage a virtual network, multiple data centers, your VPN solution. These, just like in that other diagram, are all VMs that are on my domain. So I'm fully able to enforce things using group policy, using, if you folks are familiar with the System Center agent deployment, there's nothing to learn. It's exactly the same. I simply deploy the agents up there. Now I'm able to keep my machines in compliance, patching, all of that is pretty much the same, except I get the scale much higher if I want. In this case, this looks more real world here because we have redundant domain controllers. So that way you do have the replication to on-premise, but for some reason if your VPN is acting up, let's say the ASA cluster was being patched and is down, these services are not affected, especially for web users. As you can see here, we have the ability to spread this out as well. If I can have a hybrid SharePoint solution where maybe search is on Azure because it's, let's say, a bigger burden, and I can go ahead and have maybe more of my user proximity focused items locally. I've already mentioned this. Fully supported is Active Directory on Azure. You don't have to upgrade your domain levels. Pretty much every solution these days for Microsoft leverages the Windows Server 2003 native or above level. So whether it's Link or SharePoint or any other solution, Exchange. So there's really no upgrades. You simply need to set the connection up, and then you'll go ahead and have pretty much just another Active Directory site. I did get a message here. As you can see here, we're fully talking about Active Directory authentication. So SQL servers are using Windows or mixed mode. That doesn't change. We're talking about Exchange. So let's say I'm using Exchange for a relay for SharePoint. That doesn't change. And also IIS. IIS can be fully managed using your domain authentication structure. A little more detail on what the hybrid looks like. And also how you can leverage the System Center solution for Microsoft to automate a lot of this. So what I've been showing you scales even higher. So in this case, we're talking about your typical on-premise solution where you have your server infrastructure, you have your client base, whether they're laptops, whether they're Mac or PC, you have the authentication environment with Active Directory, and then you have System Center Configuration Manager. You can then start tying things in, such as Windows Intune. Windows Intune is a software as a service solution, very much like Configuration Manager, so you can push this information out, whether it's publishing an application or enforcing firewall rules to a variety of different devices. And then I can tie that into Azure. I can have presentation of those devices, or maybe a System Center Configuration Manager server on Azure. In this case, you're sort of seeing what the VPN tunnel can do for you. One of the most powerful products from Microsoft that unfortunately a lot of the client base doesn't know about, we've got to beef up our marketing on this one, is SCOM, or System Center Operations Manager. One of the requirements for every division of Microsoft, every product division has to do this, is they have to design a management pack or a definition, basically sort of a dictionary and definition list of how their product needs to be run well, if something's wrong, how to remediate. So pretty much every department creates their own best practices definition files for the System Center Operations Manager platform. And what that allows you to do is get insight from the people who design the products to see how those applications are running and maybe if they need to be fine-tuned or if an issue needs to be remediated and how. This applies to, if you folks have ever used SCOM with Exchange, you'll see how incredibly insightful that information is. It doesn't say the server is slow. It'll tell you exactly why and whether or not that's a normal occurrence. Not only does this apply, just like it does on-premise, to infrastructure as a service, because we're talking about the Windows Server platform or Linux or pretty much any OS that you would use SCOM to monitor, it also applies to the platform as a service solution. So we have that same methodology with the product releases on-premise applied to platform. So the same folks that are making the platform solution provide a management pack for Azure so you can see if it's working correctly, and not only that, you can take action. So the full solution there allows you to not only monitor but remediate issues regardless of whether they're on-premise, regardless whether they're on Azure, or regardless whether or not you're using the infrastructure or the platform solution. And this is sort of what the idealistic environment here looks like. This is, one of those things where smaller organizations might not really have the infrastructure to deploy some of these on-premise, or perhaps the Need Orchestrator, for example, is a product that's designed to automate a lot of very complex tests. It's a beautiful thing to see when you see it in very large environments. Not really needed if you're only going to have, let's say, the equivalent of a 3-node cluster and maybe the equivalent capacity on Azure. But when working together, this does really give you a full lifecycle management solution. So, for example, I'm going to go ahead and manage things. I'm going to go ahead and create a service that consists of a web server, a VM, backend, all with App Controller, which is going to be sort of my service design solution. I'm going to use Orchestrator to go ahead and do something with it, and use DPM to back it up. Not only that, but I can then move this workload to Azure using App Controller. And then through that lifecycle process, while it's up and running, I can fully monitor it with Operations Manager, change things with App Controller. And one of the very popular new products from Microsoft is Microsoft System Center Advisor. I can go ahead and get advice. Maybe I need a little more horsepower. Most folks deploy this on 3 servers versus 2, that sort of thing. I can get that sort of feedback from the System Center suite. And I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. The focus here really is on showing you that there's quite a bit to this solution. It's also not segmented in ways that don't work with each other. The infrastructure, the platform, and the service or software as a service solutions really work in unison, whether you're using Office 365, whether you're using another solution, so that you can really create the service that allows you to deliver the service that your customer needs. The customers need in the way best possible. And in short summary here, you'll see that there's a global footprint. Everything I've discussed here can be deployed all over the world so that you get the service that your customers want as they need it. You have flexible solutions, so you have Linux, you have Windows, you have those application servers such as Oracle and SQL. And then you have that full integration where you can go ahead and move workloads around, or maybe start migrating workloads and really leverage the state-of-the-art Active Directory platform to go ahead and manage authentication and policy enforcement throughout the lifecycle of your organization. So I guess we'll open it up to any questions.
Well, while we're waiting for questions to come through, I just want to thank you for an excellent presentation, Dave. Really appreciate you going over all those slides in such great detail. And wanted to let everyone know we do have a workshop on Azure for IT professionals. So if you're looking to get some more in-depth training with hands-on labs and reference material, just send a message to info@newsignature.com and we can connect with you for that. And Christine is going to provide the information on how you can get a recorded copy of this tech showcase for future.
Yep. Okay, I am going to stop the recording.